Well, hello and welcome to Binge Watch, the podcast where we take a look at the hottest new TV and film releases on streaming television platforms. I'm Hannah Fernando, the group editor of Woman and Woman and Home magazine.
Yes, you are. And I'm Ian McEwan, writer on TV and Satellite Week, TV Times and What's on TV magazines and whatsawatch.com website, yes. And today we're looking at the new releases that will be available on Friday the 14th of February 2025. Happy Valentine's. Including Apple TV horror The Gorge, starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy as smitten snipers, and Hanging Out at Home with Katherine Ryan, courtesy of you.
Yes, we will. But we'll also be checking out the real story of a calamitous US forces mission in Somalia in the Netflix series Surviving Black Hawk Down and the return of ITVX cold case crime drama Unforgotten. But first, Ian, what is in the news, please?
Well, A, I've had flu for a week, but like Alan Partridge, I've bounced back. And B, Annette Bening will star as a mob boss in the Apple TV Plus drama Lucky, which features, Anya Taylor-Joy, as a woman trying to move on from her criminal past. What else is in the news, Hannah?
Well, it's very much in the news, isn't it? But Netflix documentary Grenfell will examine the events that led up to the very tragic 2017 fire at Grenfell Tower in West London.
Well, it's a Valentine's-themed podcast in some ways, Hannah. And what's more romantic than two cold-eyed assassins falling for each other? Yes, we are starting on Apple TV Plus with a new horror film which arrived on Friday the 14th of Feb. It's called The Gorge. And here's a clip.
West Tower Observation Post. Your home for the next 365 days. There is no outside communication here.
What's that on the other side?
That is East Tower. Contact with the other side is strictly forbidden.
So what's the mission? To keep people from going in the gorge?
No. You need to stop what's in the gorge from coming out.
So I do love a horror movie. I loved The Queen's Gambit, which starred Anya Taylor-Joy. And I loved Whiplash, which was the breakout movie for the fabulous Miles Teller. So when I saw they were both appearing in this, not just those two, but also Sigourney Weaver, I thought, I'm well up for this. However, quite early on, there are a few red flags. Okay, so they say show, don't tell, don't they, Hannah, about how to make film and TV? Well, there's a lot of telling and not showing at the beginning of this, and at one point a man starts playing an accordion in a graveyard. I'm like, red flag, and then starts telling his story. Anyway, so for quite a lot of the beginning of this, I was getting really annoyed at how badly told the story was and how utterly implausible the entire setup was. But once I'd got over that, I just thought, why don't you just go with it and enjoy it? I did enjoy it. And at the heart of it, I mean, you've got fair play to Taylor-Joy and Teller for getting through it and making you care, because they managed to do that, God knows how. And the story about the two of them, they're both assassins, they're both snipers, and I will not explain the reasons why they're stationed on either side of this mysterious gorge, which, you know, and the reasons behind that and the backstory will all become clear, but it's highly unlikely tale. But yeah, they kind of fall in love across the chasm. They can see each other through sort of binoculars, and they write messages on big whiteboards for each other. That's rather charming. Sigourney Weaver, I have to say, she kicks off doing a very boring kind of interview scene with Teller, and she's not really used very well in this, I would have to say. You also have Soapy Derisu, who was superb in Gangs of London, and he has the kind of Basil exposition role. So when Teller's character, I should tell you the names of the characters, shouldn't I? So Miles Teller plays Levi, an American sniper, on one side of the gorge, and Anya Taylor-Joy plays Drassa, who was a Lithuanian assassin on the other side. Okay, so poor old Soapy Dirisu as JD. He's the guy who's now leaving his post in the tower. Each of them has to spend a year there. And so he has to give this very long speech explaining to Levi, like, this is how it is, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, yeah, as I say, it's just a totally crazy premise. And it gets crazier. Once they go into the gorge itself, it gets even more bizarre. But I enjoyed it. Yeah, I did enjoy it. It's just totally off the wall, but with absolute star power in the two leads. So, yeah, what did you make of this, Hannah?
Well, there is star power, which is kind of why it's so weird, I think. And like you say, you think it's going to be amazing because of it, and you have to get over the fact that it's a bit ridiculous to actually kind of start to enjoy it. I mean, the idea that two snipers fall in love from across the gorge is kind of crazy, weird premise for it anyway. It's not, I'm going to be really honest with you, it's not for me. I find it too kind of far-fetched, too ridiculous in places. I don't think the narrative's that great either. And given the star wattage of this, I do feel it could have been kind of better, and I'm kind of surprised they wanted to be involved in it. But having said that, this is a genre that it's not my thing. It's not something that I absolutely love. So for somebody who perhaps, does like this more sort of far-fetched, slightly unbelievable storyline, then it's for you. But no, I've got to be honest with you, it didn't catch me.
Okay, and while we're about it, another horror movie, post-apocalyptic thriller Elevation, is currently available on Prime Video. That stars Anthony Mackie. And while in the gorge there are monsters coming from the deep, in Elevation there are these monsters that cannot go above 8,000 feet altitude. But if you go below that line, they're called reapers. They're kind of like these giant bugs that have conquered the planet. And if you go below that line, they will try and kill you. So yeah, check that out. That's quite fun. Now, yet more romantic offerings, Hannah, as we move across to the streaming platform You for a new series called At Home with Katherine Ryan. And here's a clip.
Full disclosure, this queen is just trying to hold it all together.
When did you get permission to have a cat?
Never really, but it's fine. So, can I entertain the nation and be the best wife?
We were able to get intimate in the bathroom.
I didn't know we were saying that.
And mom?
I'm the parent still, and if I say no, I say no.
Okay, well, we'll see about that. This is my life, and you may watch, and you're probably going to want to judge.
Yeah, Katherine Ryan is definitely back. I mean, she sort of started out, I think I remember seeing her on kind of Whose Line Is It Anyway or something like that, on that kind of comedic circuit. And she's really, I guess, become a household name of late. And I would say she's relatively Marmite in terms of a comedian. I think some people really struggle with her. And I try quite a lot because I think it's really brilliant that, there's a successful female comedian. But this is kind of the other side of her, and this is her a reality show, essentially. For those of you who've tuned into this before will know that this very much tracks the family life and the dynamic behind closed doors, or not behind closed doors in this instance. So you've got her there with her husband. You've got their two children, Fred and Fenna, and then you've also got her daughter Violet from a previous relationship, and that sort of kicks up. There's lots of interesting kind of storylines in here that people might relate to. So, for example, Violet, she's 15, she's a bit of a force of nature. She doesn't want to. She's in GCSE years, and she's not knuckling down. She wants to do other things like doom scroll, or do the things that teenagers want to do. Essentially, she's no different to many others. And so you can see his difficult relationship with her, and he says, I've not known her for that long. I don't feel like I can step in and, be really hard on her. I find that really difficult. And he says, but I think that her mum, Catherine, is a bit kind of easy on her, to which she has a right go at him back. And that is sort of the premise of this. She's quite hard work, Katherine Ryan, in this as a cohabitant, I would suggest. She's quite she's a force of nature herself. And this sees her kicking off this 10-month comedy tour, where essentially he takes the reins of the family life while she goes and does stand-up comedy. And it's interesting because I always think with a lot of comedians, they work so hard to get their content, and I think she has done previously, but she sort of talks about, I'm worried about I haven't got new content, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, and she has this real mum guilt. So whether this is kind of female skewed, probably, this real working mum guilt where they feel that they can't do enough. The other thing, she breastfeeds all the time, so she's getting her boobs out all the time, frankly, all over the shop. She says there isn't anyone that hasn't seen them now, and she's very sort of earth mother, yet a career woman. And can those two really, really connect? She convinced him to go and see a therapist. Turns out they're both they're sleeping in bed with their children, so they're saying perhaps you need to see an intimacy counsellor as well. It's very there's nothing sort of that they don't talk about. I as I say, I think Katherine Ryan is relatively Marmite for people. I mean, I was late to our pod because I was slightly involved in it. I couldn't stop watching it. So that says something. So I find it really quite interesting. And you do get, I don't think she hams it up for the cameras either. But Ian, what do you think?
Interesting one, this. I did enjoy watching it, though. It kind of irritated me quite a lot, but almost in a good way, if you know what I mean. So UK TV have previously done Meet the Richardsons, which was about John Richardson and his comedian partner. And that was very much, sort of scripted, really, and played for laughs. Though, of course, they're not together anymore, are they? But it was about their home life, but it was a fictional version, deliberately. And, you understood that this was, there were people acting in it as well. Well, this is supposedly playing it a bit more straight about, the many family life reality shows we've had about celebrities. However, Katherine Ryan does seem to be kind of crowbarring in potential comedic material. So she makes a big deal out of, should I be a trad wife, and makes some jokes about that and dresses up in a sort of old-fashioned dress. And, it all seems a bit forced. But I did find it interesting. I mean, she's not my cup of tea comedically, and I think you get the impression she's quite a challenging personality, though you're not sure how much of that is a sort of persona that she's putting on. But certainly her partner, because I think they first met when they were quite young, and then they sort of reunited many years later after she'd already had a child with someone else. He seems quite a sort of even-tempered, mild-mannered fellow, and she drags him to couples counselling. And of course it turns out, which is often what happens when one partner is desperately keen to take the other to counselling, it turns out that the person who was keen to go into the counselling is the one who's causing most of the problems. Because you see that, and again, I don't know if she's putting it on, but she just constantly speaks over him, says how rubbish he is at everything, and yet complains. She complains that he doesn't take the lead, but then she says, but I'm the best leader, so he'd be rubbish at it anyway. So, and it is kind of funny, I guess. I'm not sure. It'd be, well, anyway. The teenage stuff is good, because obviously that dynamic of a stepfather coming into the family, and then the younger kids actually being his kids. That's a really complex and challenging dynamic, I think, especially for the child who has a different father. So that was quite interesting. So I did find it a good watch, but I found Katherine Ryan quite annoying. But I kind of think that in a way that's kind of her shtick, is her comedic persona is this kind of like brassy, overconfident show-off. And some of that does leak in, so you're never really sure, are they just putting on an act to make this good to watch, how much truth is there in this about their relationship and their family life? Also, it does really worry me when people put their very young kids into a TV show, because obviously they have no way of consenting to that. I think that's a dangerous road to go down. But anyway, I did find it interesting. Over on Netflix, yet more romantic fare for you, Hannah. We have a 3-part documentary series called Surviving Black Hawk Down. And here's a clip.
It was the most violent thing I've ever witnessed.
Destruction everywhere.
I took my camera and I pressed record.
There's no way I'm going to live through this. I'm thinking this is it. Just slowly.
Over the horizon. That Black Hawk was down.
Black Hawk Down, we got a Black Hawk Down. Yes, you may remember the brilliant 2001 Ridley Scott film Black Hawk Down, which starred Josh Hartnett and Ewan McGregor. And it was all about this infamous incident in Mogadishu, Somalia, where, American forces were pinned down, 3 helicopters were shot down, and they were going in to sort of target a warlord, but it turned into kind of like a survival and rescue mission for their own personnel. And this is actually produced by Scott's production company. And this time we're hearing from the people who actually took part. And it does flesh out some quite interesting backstory, because the US US involvement abroad is fraught with danger, as has been proved many, many times over the years. But in this case, they were helping to bring in aid because basically the civil war was kind of causing a famine. But when they started targeting this warlord, you hear from Somalians who had experience of what it was like having the Americans there, American boots on the ground. And one in particular who explains like how initially he was sort of working for the United Nations, but because of the way he was treated by American troops, he turned and kind of supported the warlord against them. So, it's an extraordinary story. And by the end of episode 1, you're just getting to the point where there's all this planning to go in with air cover from helicopters, and then you've got a sort of cortege of military vehicles going in, and they're going to capture this warlord and sort of his lieutenants. That's the idea, and bring them back to the American base. But then it all starts to go horribly wrong. And it's interesting hearing from them. I mean, these guys, young guys who were in the military, and this was their first engagement. Of course, they were really excited, and they didn't think anything could possibly go wrong because, the overwhelming force of the US personnel, and it just very quickly all went horrifically wrong. So, it's a fascinating story. It's a well-made documentary series. What did you think, Hannah?
Well, do you know what? I really enjoy stuff like this, if enjoy is the right word, because, of course, the subject matter is pretty awful. But I enjoy it because I think it just fills part of my lack of knowledge, I guess. And docu-series like this are just so incredibly interesting, and the learnings, and I just think a lot of the stuff is sort of, when we have history lessons, you don't necessarily hear about everything, do you? You hear about the big things, but this is a big thing for a lot of people. And, just seeing how, the US forces were bringing in, aid and kind of how it all started. And I suppose, as I say, I've only seen the first part of this, but you're engrossed immediately. And I think because, the world is kind of like, I don't know, it feels on a bit of a precipice, doesn't it, at the moment, a bit of a knife edge. When you watch something like this and the horrors of, situations like this, it just makes you, realise how important harmony is, I guess. So I found it incredibly interesting and very well done, which is Also quite difficult, isn't it, when there's been a film? It's sometimes quite difficult to go back, but I think the premise of this is slightly different and the way they've done it is very different.
Okay, we're going to finish with the return of a very popular cold case crime drama, which is available as a box set on ITVX. It's Unforgotten, and here's a clip.
So you take the parts here: head, arms, legs.
Knees and toes, knees and toes.
The killer was interrupted.
I've done nothing wrong!
It's just about the oldest motive for murder there is.
I don't know why, but when I started to watch this, I just wanted to cry loads of times. I don't know why it did this to me. I don't know whether I'm just feeling completely, in a place where I need to cry. But I don't know. There's so much going on. It's like a sensory overload, I would say, almost immediately. So we're back with Detective Sunny and Jess, who everybody will know from the previous series. Sunny, played by Sanjeev Bhaskar, and DCI Jess Jones, played by Sinead Keenan. And they're fairly new into their relationship, but it's less fraught in this series. They've got a real respect for each other, and they're kind of they work well. They work well together, but they find that there's a body being found in this very sort of bleak marshland, and I mean all of these things. There's no. It does what it says on the tin, every kind of episode, doesn't it? Or every series kind of opens up with that, with something gruesome, a gruesome finding, and this is no different. But what I like about this, and some people might not like, and I usually don't like, my caveat, is kind of the going to and from all different stories. But I think actually that's what makes it different. So you've got that going on over there. And then you've got the relationships, because, of course, we know that DCI James, her husband, was having an affair. She's got a really busy job. She gets called, she's got to go out. I think he feels quite lonely. You see that dynamic. You see the fact that he was doing a meal for them, then she got a call, she had to go out. She got home, empty bottle of wine, phone on the table. She goes through the phone. Well, she can't get into the phone, actually. The PIN code's wrong. Obviously, there's a lack of trust there as well. So there's kind of that going on. And then we see a lot of refugees climbing out of the back of a lorry and sort of being shoved out into the world, and people picking them up. So there's another storyline there. So there's a kind of a sensory overload, but it does all come back together. It all weaves in. I mean, I think this is something that if you liked it last time, you're going to like it this time. It's as simple as that. It does what it says on the tin, and it's not deviating from that. And I think that's quite sensible, because there was a really sort of a warmth in reception for it. So yeah, I have to say I did enjoy it, but as I said, I don't know why. It's sort of, there was lots of emotion for me with lots of these things. There's lots of, well, obviously sad stuff happening, but you go from sort of seeing something, sort of a cold killing, if you like, or is it, to family situations and upset emotions. So yeah, I enjoy it. What do you think, Ian?
Well, the same week that we had a new Asian detective, Verdi, arriving on BBC One, we have the return of D.I. Sunil Khan, played by Sanjeev Bhaskar. And, I mean, Unforgotten has been very popular and highly rated, but I've never really got into it. I remember trying to watch it early on when the fabulous Nicola Walker was the other lead, and I sort of found the banter between the two characters rather excruciating. Anyway, I did watch it this time, and there was a lot about it that I liked. First up, I thought, Silent Witness, you need to up your game, because they cram so many different storylines into the cold case, and
Yeah.
you're thinking, how are these all going to come together, these different strands? So you've got a sort of right-wing GB News type commentator played by Mayanna Buring. Okay, and then her fiancé is a paraplegic. Then, as you say, Hannah, there's a refugee story, and also caught up in that is kind of about how the British have treated people who worked for them in countries where they were perhaps in a war zone or wherever. Then you've got a history lecturer, Juliet, played by Victoria Hamilton, who I really like. There's a whole storyline there kind of about trigger warnings and that kind of thing in universities. I mean, I'm sure like the anti-woke brigade are going to be very overexcited about this. And then you've also got radicalization online, which is a storyline about an autistic young man whose mother, who is clearly a hoarder, is played by Michelle Detrice. Yes, from Some Mothers Do Have Them many years ago. Anyway, so I kind of feel they've thrown a bit too much at it, and especially tackling all these contentious issues. You know, each one of them on its own is like a hot potato, isn't it? But yeah, they certainly give you bang for your buck, and I shall be fascinated to see how it all works out. And I mean, meanwhile, of course, you know, you can't be a TV detective without a troubled home life, as we know. So appropriately, Jess has concerns about the fidelity of her partner. And Sonny, well, he's a bit lonely, really. He's trying to kind of connect with his family, but finding it difficult. In fact, we start out, he's dining on his own in a restaurant, and that kind of sets the tone. So, yeah, I have to say I was impressed, but I kind of feel like too many contentious issues competing for attention. But, yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to see how it all pans out. And there was a lot about it that I liked. Now we've got to that time, Hannah, where we find out what you've been binge watching this week.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear that I just want to be in the sun because it's so miserable here. And so I've been watching A Place in the Sun because actually it's making me feel like, I don't know, I just want to book a holiday, really. Also, and I don't know why I haven't watched this before, but I haven't watched it for absolutely ages since Noel Edmonds did it. But I've been watching Deal or No Deal, which of course has got the newish presenter Stephen Mulhern. It's got exactly the same vibe. It's a bit like Strictly. It's kind of this overexcited behaviour by everybody who loves everybody. It's kind of like this commune or community, I should say, of people. It fascinates me. How about you?
Quite a lot of daytime TV I noticed there, Hannah, yeah? Well, there's a very good...
Well, I'm working hard, Ian.
There's a very good true crime documentary series on Netflix, which is all about the Boston Marathon bombings and the hunt to find the bombers. And that is well worth a look, I must say, an incredible story. Now, we've just got time to look ahead to next week's offerings. So what is on the Binge Watch menu?
Well, muscle-bound crime fighter Reacher returns to face a formidable foe on Prime Video.
And the untold story of America's black space pioneers is recounted in The Space Race on Disney+. So we look forward to those and much, much more. But in the meantime, listeners,
Keep watching!